Hey everyone, it's Aaron. Welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited about today's video. We're going to be interviewing my friend Emily Perry, who is one of the primary guitarists for Passion. Now, we met a couple of years ago. We were playing together at a youth conference, and we've just kept in touch ever since. And I invited her on to the channel to do an interview really surrounding the topic of why we don't see more female instrumentalists in church music. And I think we could all agree that if we look across the churches that we volunteer in, the majority of the instrumentalists are men. Now, there are women in the worship ministry, but primarily they're either serving as a vocalist, or even if they're playing an instrument, is primarily to accompany themselves as they sing. So I'm really excited for you to hear her thoughts, hear her voice as she kind of expounds upon this topic, and you get to hear more from her experience. And I think she brings a great positive voice and great insight to this topic. So I can't wait for you to hear it. Also, if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel, like the video. It really helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. All right, Emily, welcome to the channel. Thanks so much for giving us your time. Before we dive into this great topic, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about yourself, about your journey, how you got hooked up with Passion, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So I play guitar. That's my thing. And I started in like 8th grade. I wanted to play the drums. My dad was like, that's way too loud. Pick a different instrument. So then I said electric guitar, and he said, same problem. And I was like, okay. So I decided that I would play acoustic guitar. And really the only way that I could play guitar was at my youth group. And that was something that I was going to every week. And so I wanted to join the worship team. I played like Viva La Vida or something as my like audition song.
Oh yeah.
And just kind of like kept doing that. Eventually our worship leader, who led from electric, he went to college. We didn't have anyone. And so I was like, what the heck, I'll try it. I worked at a summer camp that summer, literally saved every dollar that I had, and then bought like my first real guitar.
Nice.
And
What was
like,
your first real guitar?
It was an American Standard Telly.
Nice.
Which I mean, it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
It has like the two-tone sunburst. I don't like how it looks now. I would never play it, to be honest. But I still have it, yeah.
Nice.
But it just sits in my closet. But yeah, so then I just started doing that, and then eventually that kind of became, I mean, something that I was doing at least once, if not twice a week, whether that was on Sundays or on Wednesday nights for youth. And eventually, through a lot of twists and turns, I am doing what I'm doing now, which is pretty wild and something that, I don't know, it's still very like, not shocking per se, but it's shocking,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and it's definitely something that I know that it's just what God wanted me to do. And I didn't know that in 8th grade, but it's definitely like super clear now, and that it's a very like fun, awesome experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you were learning, and even now, like, do you have any like inspiration, influences, specifically women that kind of led you into what you're doing now?
I mean, when I was first starting, I feel like growing up, I never saw even like a female musician. Like my church didn't even have like a woman piano player or anything. It was all dudes, and like girls did all the singing. And when I was first interested in joining the team, it was like, oh, cool, like you could sing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I really didn't have anybody to look up to in like real life.
Yeah.
I started going to Passion, and Christy Knuckles was our worship leader. And so she was someone who was obviously very influential, I feel like, for a lot of people, but also for me. And then people like Brooke Frazier was, you know, kind of like the closest thing that I had to like, oh, that's a girl who can play guitar. That's cool. And she can play a lot of things, and that's cool. But outside of really them, I didn't really have a ton of like female influence, I would say.
Yeah. It was really cool. Like one of my main like mentor influences in my life, our worship leader at my dad's church that I grew up in, was a female. She's awesome. We still have a relationship. We talk. And so, I mean, it was like not weird for me to just think, oh yeah, there's tons of women in, you know, worship. And they're like, But, primarily we do see women as either vocalists or they are playing an instrument, but they're generally just accompanying themselves vocally. So
Totally.
why do you feel like, do you have an opinion of why we see fewer female instrumentalists, and especially guitarists? I mean, I feel like we're seeing a little more like female bass players kind of coming into
Yeah.
the onto the stage, whatever. But why do you feel like that's kind of a dynamic right now, specifically in worship music?
I think, and I mean, I'm sure it's 100 different things, but I feel like most women instrumentalists tend to go more into the classical space. Like you see so many
Mm.
violinists or cellists, like I think that doesn't feel so foreign to me.
Yeah, totally.
But when you flip the page into outside of classical stuff, it's really not super prevalent. And I don't know if that's because of the lack of exposure. I mean, for me, even now, I've only ever played with 2 other girl guitarists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've seen other people online, and you
Right,
chat or
yeah.
whatever, but like to actually have a live worship setting, I've only played with 2 other people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's, as we're growing up, you just don't see it. And so you just don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if maybe it's just less interesting, I don't know. But
Yeah.
for me, when I saw guitar as a thing, I was like, oh, I'm playing the guitar. Like once
Yeah,
I
yeah.
really got hooked on it, it was like, that's it. But I don't know why more girls don't have that. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a cultural, like, expectation, or like the whole, worship music is based off of more rock genre. And like, we
Yeah.
see mainly male led rock groups. So I don't know if that's, kind of, we don't see it represented in the space as much. But yeah, I've never thought about from a classical perspective, because I went to classical, college. And yeah, we had
Yeah.
tons of female violinists, piano players, whatever. And we had tons of male that were just vocalists. So
Yeah.
I feel like it is more in this space that we see less women instrumentalists. So do you feel like, have you ever actually faced any challenges of that, or like bias towards female instrumentalists?
I mean, I wish that I could say no, but I would definitely say yes. I think, a very easy, obvious one would be if we do like travel for things. I'm not unaware that like I'm an extra hotel room, and
Right,
there's extra spaces that have to be provided, which I do think makes it more challenging depending on what your setup looks like. Because a lot of times I am the only girl. So it's like
Yeah.
4 guys and then me.
Right.
So trying to navigate, also, you're in this group of guys and then you're the only girl and you kind of have to like be a guy for guy's sake, you know what I mean? But like you're still definitely a girl. So you're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's definitely some social things that you do kind of have to navigate of like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I be like one of the guys in a cool way that's not like, oh, we just have this girl who like always comes with us. That's so lame. And I think thankfully for me, the guys that I get to travel with and do things with, like we're all best buds, and it really is like they're my younger brothers, or, and it's like that
Yeah.
makes it super fun. But I've also had times when I've gone somewhere and someone's been like, oh, you actually like aren't as bad as I thought you'd be. And you're like, literally, and you're
Wow.
like, dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And thankfully that's few and far between, but like I genuinely have had that happen
Yeah.
more than once. And then just kind of like having the ability to just brush it off, because it's like it doesn't matter what their
Yeah.
opinion is. That doesn't decide if I'm prepared enough or whatever it might be. Like I've put in what I've put in and I know what that is, and that's good enough for me. If you think, oh, you're a girl, no way that you'll be ready to go, I'm like, oh,
Right.
well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Do you
I'm ready.
feel? Yeah. Do you feel like churches are like unintentionally creating these barriers that are like preventing women to come into like the instrumental space?
I don't think so. I really do think it's an exposure thing, because I think for me, I get a lot of DMs from like younger girls who are like, oh my gosh, I saw you playing at this event or whatever, and it's so cool. Like, I've never seen another girl play before. I'm going to audition for my youth group and I want to
Yeah.
play bass, or I want to, try something out. And I think now, especially with social media, like I see so many girl guitarists now, girl bass players, so many people that I would have never seen when I was younger. And I think it's becoming more normal to where it's like, oh yeah, I can just play. And I don't think that churches or, any type of church leadership is like setting it up that way. I think culturally it's just very uncommon.
Yeah.
And so it seems weird to be like, actually I kind of want to try to play the drums. I don't know. But I think it's just more of like a social thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like do you feel like women have something to provide to the dynamic, even in just an atmosphere of worship, that men can't provide?
Oh, that's a good one. I think that we do provide a different type of sensitivity. I think we're more wired to view people on a personal and emotional level. And not that men are not capable of that.
Yeah.
They're 100% capable of that. But I think maybe it's a little easier to look out at the congregation and be like, oh man, I see that mom with 3 kids. I don't know exactly what her morning was like, but I can kind of take a guess. Or I can see this student who's not really in it and they just kind of look, bored or whatever. And it's easy to be like, oh man, like I remember when I was in youth and I had to go to big church and I was so bored and I just wanted to get out of here.
Yeah.
And I think that sensitivity allows us to maybe just lead from a different perspective. I think it's, this very wide view that we all are contributing to, but I think from the leadership perspective, I think the sensitivity is something that we're able to bring. And then I think from a group dynamic too, just being able to, I don't want to say like soften the vibe, but like,
for real,
there's just kind of like we don't all have to get wild, and we can have real deep conversations, and we can be normal people to each other. We don't have to just be like, oh yeah, we're in the band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know, for me, like with some of the people that I travel with, like we've had so many great conversations that I do think have started because of there being a girl there and me being like, so like, what's actually going on with you guys' lives? Like, how are your kids? How's your wife? Like what's going on? And I don't often see that from most guys, I would say, in the group setting.
Yeah, especially when it is primarily like a group of dudes. There's like, just dynamically, we often chat about gear, chat about sports,
Right.
So yeah, I think because I often find myself in deeper conversations when I'm with my wife, Emily, and then, another couple or other people, just because I'm less tempted to go into that like guy talk that we just often gravitate towards and stay on the surface level. So no, I think that's awesome. And I also think like that whole connection piece, like being able to connect to another 50% of the congregation, like being able to not just have male leadership or even male leadership on just the instrument side of things, having the female dynamic in that brings, like you said, other girls that are going to be able to connect more in the environment, in the atmosphere with the Lord, because they see almost like a camaraderie with another woman on stage and a connection piece. And even from like a discipleship piece, like inviting more younger girls into the space too. Like my daughter Josie, she's almost 4. She already like has a huge interest in drums. I play drums out a lot, and I have my kit set up and I practice, and she hops on and plays all the time. And like, I see that. So I'm like, oh, I would love for her to like find a female drummer that could like inspire her, when she gets older, and kind of be a mentor for her. So that may be even a reason why, I was thinking, or even was the spark behind this conversation. But well, yeah, if you were to give advice to young girls that are like wanting to play guitar or wanting to be primarily an instrumentalist, what, or even in primarily a worship setting, what advice would you give them?
I think advice that I give to any person, whether they're a guy or a girl, would just be always be prepared and
Yes.
really take time beforehand. Like my goal, and I don't always hit it, is I want to be the most prepared person that's at a rehearsal. I want to be the person that I know all the chords and I know all the parts and I know the structure of everything. So it's just a second nature thing, and you're able to lead way better when you're not thinking about all of that. But then I would say girl specific would just be, don't be discouraged that there's not any other girls on the stage. Or something that I kind of struggled with for a while was, when it kind of like splits off, you have rehearsal and it was kind of like, okay, vocalists kind of hang out over here and then the band hangs out over here. And then I'm like, well, where do I go? Because
right.
I'm a band person, but that's all guys. And I don't want to talk about the NASCAR race, and then it's like all the girls over here and I'm not like, the most like girly girl. So I'm not sitting there trying to talk about my like makeup routine and, all of that kind of stuff. So it's like, where do I go? But I would just say, don't be afraid to hang out with the guys and be a part of that dynamic, because as a band, that is super helpful and you are able to gain chemistry just through knowing each other, and that's super important. But also don't look at the vocalists and be like, oh, I'm not like them, or I'm not one of them, I'm different. The way that we're able to connect is through being women, and that's also very valuable, and not forsaking that relationship just because you're like, we're doing different things.
Right.
Because I feel like for a long time it was like, I'm just not one of them, so I'm just not going to like not talk to them. But, it's just like, that's not my people.
Right.
But the reality is like, they are my people and they are my people. So like,
totally. Yeah.
Just be involved with both.
It's so easy to kind of have that like separation of not even just, like singers and band or whatever, but also the worship band and then the AVL team and then the whoever. So I think it's cool trying to, have more of that visual of unity within the group. You mentioned something that like you want to do when you come into rehearsal is be like the most well-prepared person on the stage. Do you feel like that comes from do you feel like you've had to prove yourself coming in as a female into the band?
Yeah. I think maybe to some degrees, yes. I think in certain spaces, for sure, I've felt like, okay, I'm getting to do this really cool thing, and I'm the only girl that got asked to do it, and I really don't want to mess this up. So I want to go as hard as I possibly can so that I know everything. But I do also think something that I learned in college was just the idea of, what we are doing is offering ourselves to the Lord, and that why would we sit there and just be like, I'm knowingly going to give you something bad. Like, I'm purposely just being lazy and just being like, oh, it's fine. Like, he's still going to like it. And so I do feel some of the, okay, I don't want to be the girl who's also not great.
Yeah.
But then I also, I hopefully more, at least, when you're the most healthy, I'm feeling it more from, I just want to make sure that I'm bringing my best, because why would I bring anything less than that? But that's not always, sometimes it's definitely the first thing.
Right. Totally. Cool. Do you feel like there's something that churches or even leaders in the church could do to help break any barriers, or at least encourage more females to come into, whether it be an instrumentalist or even into just the worship band?
Something that I've really enjoyed lately, and I've been very fortunate to, I feel like, to kind of do these a lot now, is playing at different women's conferences and women's events, and the whole band is all women. And obviously not every ministry is capable of doing that, whether that's they just don't know that many people because we're far and few between, or, obviously budget of, okay, this person doesn't even live in this state, so how do we get this person here and what does that look like? But I do think, especially for women's events, finding a way to incorporate whoever that is on your team, whether that is someone who plays piano or whatever, like, find a way to get them involved in those events specifically, because it is really encouraging as a woman to see that. But then I also think it, to the social thing from before, it does make it more normal to just have girls in the band. And then you have young girls going to those events, they're seeing that, they're like, oh, that was so sick. We just had an all-girl band. That was so cool.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wait, maybe I could do that. Or maybe I can be inspired by that girl playing drums or whatever it might be. I think that would be like the simplest and most practical way. But I also think if you have any girl in your youth group or in a young adults ministry, whatever that might be, just actively encouraging them in whatever they're doing. If they're playing acoustic while they're leading, like not a pity hype up, but just intentionally going out of your way to be like, hey, like what you're doing is awesome. And like, we're so glad that you're doing that, because I think it already is a little uncomfortable to be the only one.
Yeah.
And just to hear one person, especially like a guy in leadership, be like, hey, you're killing that right now. It's like, oh, wait, okay, great. I came in a little insecure and I don't know. I thought I was killing it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think a little compliment like that really does go a lot farther than people might think.
Awesome. Do you feel like you've had to battle like insecurity over the years?
For sure. And I think especially when there's not another girl who is playing, where you can kind of be like, hey man, like I'm not feeling great about this. Like you can't really have the girl talk moment.
Yeah. It's
just like you're just up there and then you kind of send one of your friends a text and you're like, I feel so bad right now.
Yeah.
And then they're like, I think you're probably fine. And then you're like, I mean, I hope so. And I think especially too, I mean, I started like so many people like in youth group and stuff when you're younger, and obviously you're way more insecure when you're young. And for me, most of my youth leadership team, they were like adult men. And so there was like a few of us like students who were in the band, but that was super uncomfortable emotionally at times, because you're like, okay, I have this like 35-year-old guy who's like awesome at guitar. He's been playing for 20 years. I'm 15. I've been playing for 1 year.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be as good as him, and I'm just so not. And I do think, I mean, even now I struggle with that sometimes, where the people that I play with all the time, you're like, oh man, but you're just so good. And I don't know if that is because, you know, it's just natural insecurity, or if it's insecurity because it's not a secret that I'm the only girl on the stage. And so I want to be up to the same caliber, or I don't know what that is, but.
Yeah. Cool. So if someone was watching and they're like really want to pursue guitar, even as like a career, or want to play out on the road with groups like Passion or something like that, what's some advice, male or female, that you would give them if they wanted to start going down that lane?
Okay, my first one, and you might agree with this, and it's not even music related, honestly, is just be like a cool person.
Yeah, totally.
And
People
not
have to
like
enjoy
change your
being around
personality up. Yeah, just be chill. And I think that looks like not having a big ego. That looks like not being difficult to work with. That means being teachable, being understanding of feedback. I mean, even playing for something like conference, like we get so much feedback. And if you sit there and you're like, oh, they just think that I'm not good and this is so bad, like you will have the worst time ever. And the whole goal of worship specifically is that we're all using our gifts to make something that is this unified thing that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So just take feedback and be cool.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Don't stress the small stuff, because ultimately you're still trying to serve the same goal, and you don't have to, it doesn't have to be your idea to be awesome.
Yeah.
But then also practically, musically, I practice improvising a lot, specifically so that when those flow moments came up, or when something kind of off the page happened where maybe Christian starts singing a song that I have no idea what it is, I don't panic and say, oh, my church didn't sing this hymn growing up, I don't know what this is. I'm like, I know what key we're in, I know what scales are appropriate, I know how to navigate this musically, even though I might not know what is the right part, but I still know how I can contribute to this sonically in a way that is helpful and is still, you know, congruent with the rest of the band who might all know the song. And that's happened to me before where everyone's like, oh, you didn't know that one? And you're like, never heard it in my life.
Oh, yeah, same.
So that's like the scariest feeling. But I do think things like practicing improvising and just practicing actually taking scales and chord structures and applying those kind of more off the cuff versus like cut dry, learn a song.
Yeah.
I think when it comes time to learn a song, you then have the framework to just say, oh, wait, I've heard that before. I know what that pattern is. I know what this is. And I think you learn songs way faster. You feel better in those kind of scary, what the heck is going on moments. And you actually feel like you have a better understanding of the song overall versus just being like, oh, no, I know the parts. And if something bad happens, I don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah, totally. That's awesome. So I have to ask the question because I know people are going to want to know. Tell us your rig and your rundown, what you're using
Sure.
right now.
I use this guitar right here, Novo Cirrus J.
Which I've had the pleasure of playing. It's quite the nice guitar,
great.
I will say. I've literally like dreamed about owning a Novo ever since then. I'm like, oh, how can I make this happen?
It's so great. And then I recently got a Gretsch 89 Vintage Select, which it's a duo-jet. I love it. It rips. It sounds so good.
That's awesome.
So those are my main two guitars right now. And then my board is very small. I have just like a volume pedal from Layla. I don't know how you're supposed to say that.
Okay, yeah, I don't know either.
And then that, or I guess I go into a Deep Six compressor into the volume pedal. Then I have a Brown Protein.
Oh yeah.
I have a version 2 Timmy, which I just put back on. That was like my first pedal I ever got. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot for the next 6 months. Bring back an old classic. I've been liking it.
Nice.
And then I have an HX1, which I do like chorus or just like weird stuff.
Yeah.
Or we have one song, All the Praise is Yours or Praise Yahweh, that has like a fuzz sound on it in one of the songs, like one of the sections. Mm. I'm not going to put a fuzz pedal on my board for verse 2 of one song.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
But it sounds sick, so I just use the HX1 for that. And then I have the Solus Ventus, I think that's what it is, from GFI. Yeah. I had the Specular Tempest for a long time, and I loved it. And then they came out with that one this year. And so I've been using that because it's like independent. You can have delay and reverb, 2 separate algorithms that you can control independently, whereas the Specular Tempest is one unified algorithm. And you can still control the parameters, but if you're like, oh, I don't want delay, actually, it just turns off.
Okay,
so,
cool. Yeah.
So I really liked that, but it all fits in a very small Pelican Air case that I can take as a carry-on, and I am very, very glad that I have shrunk myself over the years.
Nice. Now, are you primarily using amps where you go, or I know you've used some of the, like the Ruby and Dream, kind of the UA of kind of amp in a box kind of stuff. What do you primarily use now?
So now I am big on the Tone X1. I have 2 Tone X1s.
Oh yeah.
And so that goes out of that into a Goodwood Audio. They have like a DI that I use. Very similar to like the Daiso or other line isolator style DIs.
Yeah.
So I use those. Brian, who also plays guitar with passion, he just released some new like profiles.
Awesome.
So he's been profiling a lot of our amps, and they sound incredible.
So cool.
I used the Ruby for a long time, and I really liked it. And then I ended up getting these because they're so small, they're so cheap.
Yeah.
You can also do 2 independent amps versus just stereo effects.
Right, totally.
And so it feels so awesome. And then if we are playing something in like an arena or something outside and we get to use amps, I'll use amps.
Yeah.
I normally use either my Tyler HM18 with a ProSonic, or I'll use an AC30 with my ProSonic. But then also sometimes maybe like a matchless or something, depending on what I'm feeling.
Yeah, nice. I've kind of shrunk down to, I used to use a Kemper, and now I use a Quad Cortex.
No,
The
nice.
reason why I like the Quad is so I can run two independent amps. With the Kemper, you could run stereo of post effects, but you couldn't run anything. You couldn't run 2 amps, and you couldn't
Oh
run
yeah.
stereo effects in the pre section either. But the thing I like about the Quad is that I can profile my individual pedal. So
Yeah.
because I have a Protein as well. It's like my favorite. Because they're from Kansas City, so I know a lot of those
Yeah.
guys out there. And then I have the Carbon X as well, which is another
Oh
brown
yeah.
pedal. I have a lot of their stuff. And then, but anyways, yeah, I have tons of pedals, but I can profile them into the Quad, and
Yeah.
I can just take the Quad wherever I go, and it just makes it
Yeah.
so easy, So
Yeah. I
sometimes,
love to.
yeah, I was gonna say
Uh,
sometimes the ease is just worth it compared to the extra
100%.
10% or whatever that I could get from using all my analog
Totally.
stuff.
Yeah, I love that I take my board out of the case, I put it on stage, I plug 2 XLRs in, and then that's
Yeah,
it.
and the
I'm ready to go.
reliability,
It's so easy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Also, I love like how the Quad, the buttons are also the encoders. I feel
Oh,
like
I know,
every
yeah.
single person ever should do that. I don't know
Yes.
why that's not normal now.
My
But like the
only
first time I saw
concern
that,
when
I
I
was
made
like,
the switch,
what?
I was like, longevity wise, are these things going to last? I haven't had any
Totally.
issues. I've had it for a couple years now, but that was my only thing. I was like, are these going to wear out in like 6 months? But yeah, I
Right.
haven't had any issues. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Emily, and we
Yeah.
appreciate it. I love the conversation. And if anyone wants to follow you or anything like that, can you give us your Instagram handle, things like that?
Yeah. Instagram is just Emily T. Perry, and that's really kind of the only spot that I'm on.
Okay,
So,
nice.
yeah.
Awesome, cool. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining this conversation. And until next time, we will see you later.